opening the Yalis fire station, and also dealing with some social housing matters in Eastern St. Thomas. So lots of things happening this morning and lots of information to give to you, members of the public. Ahead of that as well, may I just once again, even though the Prime Minister has in fact given a release on the matter, extend the condolences of the entire government on the passing of Leonie Evadne Forbes, OD, one of Jamaica's foremost, iconic, and premier broadcasters and actresses. May her soul rest in peace. And now may I invite the Minister of Industry, Investment and Commerce, Senator the Honorable Orbin Hill, to make his presentation.
Thank you very much, Naomi. And I too want to add my condolences to the family of Leonie Forbes. As a youngster, I grew up knowing her as a star on television, and she has played such an important role in our society. And we should be grateful and celebrate the kind of life that she has lived and the kind of service she has given to Jamaica. This morning, it's the first time I'll be speaking at this forum. I've been in the ministry now for under a year, and I've taken some time to see what the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce does for the Jamaican business community and for the Jamaican consumers. You may or may not know that there are 22 agencies in that ministry, lots of them. So I'll give you some of the Campbell Soup acronyms that you're familiar with. JAMPR, of course, for the Jamaica Invest Corporation. That's effectively the investment arm of the ministry and of the government. We have JBDC, Jamaica Business Development Corporation. You know that very well. They do a lot of work. JAMPR does a lot of work for big investors, small investors, people who want to export, work with the Jamaica Special Economic Zone Authority, another agency in my ministry, to get BPO businesses established in Jamaica and help them. They also provide, JAMPR does, tremendous help to people coming into Jamaica, not knowing what the ground is like or how business is conducted on the ground. And JAMPR does a lot of work with them to make sure the ease of doing business in Jamaica happens and that it's easy actually to do business in Jamaica. You have another agency such as JANAC, the Jamaica National Accreditation Committee, that the board that looks after accreditation. Now, this is a very, very important agency that you don't know a lot about. For instance, except in recent past, you probably would not know, and you probably don't know, that JANAC works for not just Jamaica, but 9 other Caribbean, CARICOM countries. We just came back from Guyana. I'll talk to you about that trade mission to Guyana a bit. But JANAC there was accrediting its 4th lab in Guyana. JANAC is one of 4 bodies in the world that the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, allows to offer accreditation to labs. One of those 4 is in the United States. JANAC, there are 11 protocols in the FDA body of arrangements, and JANAC has completed 10. They have the 11th to do. JANAC is the only body in the world, whether they're inside the US or not, that has done 10 protocols of the FDA. What does that mean? Well, let's take Guyana again. One of the first places that JANAC accredited was the rice lab in Guyana. So now that JANAC has the FDA accreditation authority, and this came earlier this year, when JANAC credits like the rice lab in Guyana, when the rice arrives in the United States or Jamaican mangoes, if they accredit a lab that tests Jamaican mangoes, when the rice or mangoes accredited by a lab approved by JANAC The FDA no longer has to check them. So there's an ease of passage into the commercial arrangements in the United States. That's a huge, huge arrangement that JANAC has. And one of the best things about JANAC, apart from it does great scientific work, is that it doesn't require any money from the ministry and therefore from the government. They are able to earn their income across 10 countries, and they're looking to go to more. And they're looking to establish a satellite accreditation arrangement in Ghana. JANAC also is a member of the International Lab Accreditation Cooperation. And the same thing for the Inter-American Accreditation Co-op. So JANAC is really an unknown giant of an agency that you're going to learn a lot more. You know, of course, about the Bureau of Standards of Jamaica. They make sure that the blocks that make our houses, I give you a very simple example, they use the right cement with the right strength of cement and everything else that they have to do to test it. They test machines that calibrate, that have to be calibrated to do testing on other materials. So the BSJ is a very important, and Jamaican businesses must learn, Jamaican entrepreneurs must learn to use these agencies. Of course, you have the Trade Board, everybody knows the Trade Board, and JIPO, the Jamaica Intellectual Property Organization, among others. So I just pick out a few. So the ministry does that. So I've come to the ministry and I look at all the data around us. And something just jumped out at me. In 2021, we imported 5.975 billion US dollars of goods and services. That's not a little bit. You want me to tell you what's a little bit? How much we exported. We exported 1.441 billion US dollars worth of goods and services. The gap between what we import and the gap and what we export is $4.5 billion. Let me tell you how much that is. Everybody knows about NWC and how much NWC has to do, and they have to fix back roads and they have to put in meters. Well, we had an Australian company a couple of years ago do a study on NWC. To fix NWC, we will need $4.5 billion to fix NWC across the country. That's the negative gap in 1 year of trade. Downtown, to fix downtown, the sewage system downtown, it's estimated then that it's going to cost us $800 million to fix downtown. That's US dollars. Now that's probably closer to $1 billion US dollars. So when I looked at that, I said, my heavens, one item of export in this country, oil, costs us $2 billion approximately in 2021. That means the oil import bill alone, one item, not cars, not equipment, not air conditioning, one item alone on our import roster, oil, costs us $2 billion. It completely dwarfs the $1.441 billion of export that we make. So you see we're in a hole. Now, what that led me to do is think about the thing on a wider basis. What do other countries do? Well, look at what we look at our per capita GDP. That's under 5,000 US dollars. That means if all the GDP we made, the gross national product, was split up among every single Jamaican, each one would get under 5,000 US dollars. You calculate that by the exchange rate today, and that's 750,000 thereabouts, give or take a few, whatever the rate is on that particular day. That's what each Jamaican is worth for a year. $750,000 on that per capita GDP. So when I went out and said, look, we cannot get rich selling to only 3 million relatively poor Jamaicans. Some people get upset about the poor part. Then forget the complete relative part. So let me tell you how relative works. We are relatively rich compared to one other Caribbean country. One other Caribbean country. There are friends, I'm not going to call their names. Compared to other Caribbean countries on a per capita GDP basis, we're relatively poor. Now, compared to Israel, Israel has 9.2 million people. Their per capita GDP is about 43,000 US dollars, about the same as Canada, that has 38 million people. So, relative to Israel, we're poor. When you look at Israel, Israel clearly is not selling to only 9.2 million Israelis. My point is, or businesses, or entrepreneurs, or individuals. Individuals send a lot of things on YouTube and through the internet. Individuals, everybody in Jamaica. How many times you talk about export? No, you talk about who's the new prime minister in Britain, where him come from, where him parents come from. You talk about the election that's going to be in America next month. You talk about all kinds of things in Jamaica. We don't talk about export, so I'm talking about it. We're going to have to export a lot more to rich countries for us to become a wealthier Jamaican country. Why? Because I just tell you, Israel doesn't sell to only 9.2 million Israelis. They sell around the world. In fact, Israel is arguably America's biggest ICT partner in the world. When they have a real ICT problem, believe me, the place they head to is Israel. That's what some people say. They haven't told me that. Now, when you look at Singapore, Israel has 9.2 million people. Singapore has 5.7. So you want to hear what Singapore's GDP per capita is? Between 70 and 80,000 US, up as high as 83,000 US dollars, depending on the year that you're looking at and the foreign exchange rates. But it's north of 70. So Israel is 43 with 9.2 million people. Singapore is 80, 70 to 83,000 US dollars per person living in Singapore. And we are a dege 5,000. So when we talk about relative, I want us to be uncomfortable with the term poor because we don't have to be there. We shouldn't be lagging behind most everybody else in the Caribbean, all these tiny little countries. We're Jamaica. And so I want that discomfort, not unlike the discomfort that the kind of animal that makes pearls feels when a grain of sand gets in its shell and becomes very uncomfortable and begins to make pearls. We have to make more pearls out of our economy. So the theme of the 22 agencies, and every one of them, we meet every quarter now. Every quarter I meet with all of them, PS and me. And the theme, whatever they do, there must be focus on export. I tell our people everywhere I go, if you breathe, bottle it and export it. We must export a lot more to become a richer country. We cannot remain poor. And you know what? Because we don't talk about export, we don't invest enough in export. So it's not just I'm saying we must export. I'm saying to the business community, you must export. I don't want to say invest first. We have met people just export. France export water, put one label on it called Perrier, and you pay 15 times the amount for it that we get from the tank in St. Elizabeth. But we pay for it. So you don't have to wait to begin to export. People who are making jams and hair products for people of color, they're exporting. And I can tell you that the bag that I wear in here is made by Brescia. Brescia is exporting and is buying new material, buying new equipment to improve the quality of their product so they can export to a wider market. So the aim, and especially you, my friends in the press, you must keep this argument up because we all want Jamaica to be rich. And we must therefore make sure all our agencies, certainly ours in the Ministry of Industry and Investment, which I don't have the authority to name agency, but I was in Philadelphia with a minister. I was in Philadelphia with the Prime Minister and was sitting like there. Went to the pen thing and we were talking to people of a number of prospective investors. I said, look, there's only one man in Jamaica has the authority to name a minister, and seen there is the Prime Minister. But I have unofficial naming rights, so I've taken the unofficial right to name the minister the business ministry. Business means not just rich people and entrepreneurs, but also consumers. We have the right through the Consumer Affairs Commission and a related agency that we're going to merge to look after consumers that they get a fair deal. So while I'm pushing to support business, I am unequivocally and unapologetically pushing to make sure consumers get protected. So that's broadly the focus, and I'm giving you just the main focus. The second focus, of course, is to make sure we get local. I am emphasizing local and foreign direct investment into the country. I tell you why I said local. Recently, I was at a reception at the British High Commission, and two of Jamaica's biggest business men, who they happen to be men in this instance, but they run big business houses, took me aside and said, we have never, now I don't know what their political leanings is, because you know those guys, them have to look after, you know what I mean. Them, you know where them stand, So it wasn't about them supporting me politically. They said, we have never felt, and they're in their 40s, a time like this in Jamaica, when we feel Jamaica is taking off. And so this year, they said to me, we're putting in billions of dollars of investment in this country. Now, I can't, many people like that in the past would say we're taking money to invest somewhere else or put the money somewhere else. Business people, and I'm so happy to hear that, are looking to invest in Jamaica. So ordinary Jamaicans, make sure you invest. And the last thing, maybe you'll ask me some questions later on about our business, the delegation to Ghana, the trade mission, went extremely well. And I'll tell you that now and hand over to Ms. Francis.
Thank you, Minister Hill, for your comprehensive roundup of issues under the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce. And of course, certainly you'll take questions from the mission to Guyana. And just to point out and add to what you were saying, of course, the recent Business and Consumer Index that was released earlier this week, showing high business and consumer confidence. So yes, you'll address that too during our question and answer segment. So ladies and gentlemen of the media who are here, what we will do is take the presentations from each minister, and then following that we'll entertain questions. Minister Morgan, of course, is here to give the cabinet briefs. Ahead of Minister Morgan coming, though, let me invite the Honourable Favour Williams, the Minister of Education and Youth. Of course, yesterday we broke ground for Jamaica's first ever STEAM school to be housed in Bernard Lodge, St. Catherine. Minister will give us an update on those and other matters. Minister.
Thank you, Naomi. Good morning, everyone, colleague ministers, Minister Hill, Minister Morgan, the team from the Ministry of Education and Youth, and we have here this morning Dr. Kassan Troop, and of course our PR and communications team. Good morning to our friends in the media. So last Wednesday, October 19, 2022, we launched the End the Violence in Schools campaign with the theme, Just Meds It. A popular local phrase that means just think about it. And I want to thank all the media platforms that have been carrying that. We ask you to continue to do so. It is a year-long campaign that was launched in the context of frequent flare-up of violence among children in schools, sometimes, as you all know, with tragic and fatal results. This campaign will bring all our safety and security programs and initiatives together to form a cohesive to form a cohesive and a comprehensive program. We have to take this all of government, all of country approach because UNICEF 2018 situational analysis has informed us that approximately 80% of Jamaican children experience some form of psychological or physical violence administered as discipline. Of the children population, that 80% equates to some 300,000 children who experience some form of psychological or physical violence. The study also said that approximately 65% of students are bullied at school, and that would be about 240,000 children. And that 79%, or roughly 296% of our children witness violence in the home or community. Jamaicans all, given these figures, we should not be alarmed that we're seeing violent behavior among our children. Just yesterday, there was yet another social media posting of a fight at one of our schools. A report revealed that the students who were fighting were from the same community and that their families were allegedly presently at odds with each other. It is also alleged that a simple disagreement started the fight between the students. Our students are showing up at school psychologically and physically abused. Not only that, these same children also witness violence in the home and in the community. The result of this is fights, instances of stabbing, and other deviant behaviors at the slightest trigger. Given this situation, we have to scale up our efforts quickly to have a heavy-duty focus on psychosocial support for our children, especially the almost 300 children who suffer some form of abuse. We have an epidemic of violence among our children, and that is just the hard, cold truth. This is a mammoth task that cannot just be left to our 1,198 guidance counselors or 139 deans of discipline, or the 41 senior teachers who act as deans of discipline, or the 257 school resource officers, which is another name for saying police officers that we have in our schools. And we have been increasing these numbers over the years. What we are witnessing in our schools is not normal. It is as a result of major psychosocial issues, which include family problems, depression, anxiety, substance abuse, sexual abuse, and violence that our children are experiencing. So if we were not convinced before, we are now. We have to treat with the emotional and psychological well-being of our children and their families in a more focused and concentrated way. The purpose of the campaign we launched is to shift the culture of violent confrontations and responses among children and to equip them with conflict resolution strategies that are peaceful and healthy. We know that music and popular phrases can be used as a medium to bring the message to encourage pro-social behavior. The campaign is also a national call to action for every single Jamaican and organization to support our efforts to engender and sustain a culture of discipline and peace in our homes, schools, and communities. This is a multi-stakeholder approach to help preserve our schools as safe places. This year-long campaign seeks to reduce the incidence of violence in schools through a multifaceted approach that includes providing psychosocial support to students and parents. We want to begin with targeting families and students and have them undergo at least 10 therapeutic sessions. We want to have restorative justice practices at work in all our schools. We know this works. It is an approach that seeks to repair harm by providing an opportunity for those harmed and those who take responsibility for the harm to communicate and address their needs in the aftermath of the crime. So, for example, in the fight yesterday that surfaced, we saw the information on social media. If we had restorative justice practice at work in that particular school, the perpetrators and the victims would today undergo sessions in restorative justice practice. Additionally, we want all of our children to be aware of this practice, and we're working with the Ministry of Justice to expand this program in our schools. On Friday, this coming Friday, Minister Chuck and his team will be at Vere Technical High School as they take this program around to our schools. We also want to increase the awareness among adults and our teachers about the negative impact of adverse childhood events, ACE, on our children. There's a lot of research that show that adverse childhood experience are potentially traumatic events that occur in childhood. And we know what these examples are. Again, it's the violence, it's the abuse, it's the neglect, it's witnessing violence in the home and community, it's having a family member die by suicide, it's substance abuse, it's mental health problems, it's instability due to parental separation or household members being in jail or prison. We know all of those things impact our children negatively. We also, over this coming year, want to provide our teachers with additional training to sharpen their awareness of changes in the demeanor and the behavior of our children. The child who grabs a book from another child is sending a please help me message, which we should not ignore. We should recognize our teachers as first responders who can and do act to refer our children to the guidance counselors and deans of disciplines. Layered on this will be other initiatives, for example, the 10 therapeutic sessions for targeted children and their families. There's a lot to do, and we know we have to improve on a lot of things. We have to utilize the creative arts to maximize whole school engagement throughout the campaign. We have to introduce character education programs in school to promote a culture of pro-social behavior among our students. We have to expand uniform groups, clubs, and societies in schools. We're calling on our parents to volunteer, to be trained, so that we can have at least one uniform group in every school. I will be writing to corporate Jamaica to help to sponsor uniforms for children who sign up to be in these groups. All of these groups, Girls Guide, Boys Brigade, Cadet, etc., they need uniforms. The students need uniforms. And we don't want that expense to be the reason a child is not joining. This is a national call to action for educators, parents, students, and the general public to take personal and collective responsibilities to end violence in schools. And over the year, we will be implementing this. We'll be engaging with a lot of different organizations. We have expectations. We want to reduce the incidence of violence in schools by 50% by November 2023. We will be doing a safe school perception survey in November in order to give us that baseline. We will continue to monitor throughout the course of the year under our flagship program, Just Meds It, End Violence in Schools campaign. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Minister, thank you so much for your presentation. In fact, that Just Meds It program really speaks to, again, the psychosocial issues that students face in schools, and ensuring that our Safe Schools program is robust and no child is certainly left behind in terms of these behavioral challenges they may have dealing with it from that school level and, of course, a policy level at the ministry. So thank you so much, Minister. And now let's have the Minister without portfolio in the Office of the Prime Minister with responsibility for information. A long title, but it really is the Minister of Information, the Honourable Robert Nesta Morgan.
All right, as some people have classed me de facto. One day I'll become the jury, not you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Good morning to members of the media who are here. Also, good morning to Minister of Education and Youth, the Honorable Favor Williams, Minister of Industry, Investment and Commerce, Business, the Honorable Alvin Hill, and also to members of the Ministry of Education team, members of the OPM team, and the support team from Jamaica Information Service, as well as PBCJ. Thank you very much for joining us. Apologize for the late start this morning. We had the wreath laying of one of our former prime ministers, Donald Sangster, who happens to have been member of parliament in my constituency as well. And that I had to represent the prime minister there, so I must apologize. We don't have a lot to report this morning, but I'll just run through very quickly, and then we can take questions based on the presentations that have been made. In terms of cabinet decisions, cabinet approved recommendations of the Independent Commission of Judges of the Parish Court in respect to the compensation of judges of parish courts and other specified positions over a period of 3 years from 2020 to 2023. A special benefit offer to facilitate the allocation of 29 housing solutions at Majestic Gardens, Phase 1A in Kingston, to certain groups of contributors to the National Housing Trust was also approved. The reservation of a minimum of 3 units in Phase 1 to be administered under the lease program, and the issuance of drafting instructions to the Chief Parliamentary Council to facilitate the promulgation of such benefit offers. There was also, my apologies, there was also the appointment of a member of the board of the University of the West Indies, Mr. Wayne Chai Chung, who is now the chairman effective October 2022 to October 2025. As I said, not a lot this morning, and as such, we will move quickly into taking questions, as we usually only spend an hour. Naomi, you may go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Minister. I believe your last note would have been the Board of Management of the University Hospital.
Right, University Hospital
of
of
the
the West Indies.
Thank you so
My
much,
apologies,
Minister.
yes.
All right, our usual favorites, just on a note of humor, are here really, or members of the media are here.
I think we should
and-
give them special accreditation, no?
Indeed. And so we'll take questions. And there is one, I believe, that was sent in, given that they may have had an accident on the road, and we hope that everything is all right. So let's start with our media representatives here. Mr. Hall.
Morning, Minister. I have one question for Minister Williams and one question for Minister Hill. I'd start with Minister Williams because she's a better looking one. Minister, as part of dealing with the issue of school children and the violence in schools, it was proposed long ago that we'd have a timeout facility for children. Is that timeout facility in place, or has that been scrapped?
As far as I'm aware, well, since I've been there, I've not been told that there are any timeout facilities. We've just been utilizing what exists currently. So it depends on the level of violence. For example, I think it was last week or the week before, there was a social media video in which a boy was slapping another boy. On investigation of that case, you should have seen the press release we put out as to the steps that would be taken, including suspension from school. When the child comes back, they would be monitored and so on. No, as far as I know, there's no facility, no timeout facility to which we take our children.
Minister, your predecessor, Minister Reid, had indicated that he was going to change how persons were appointed to school boards. The Integrity Commission had a report last week which said we're still not getting it right or we appoint members to the school board. What are you doing about that, Minister?
All right, so I'm going to start from the point of the efforts of the government to date in terms of the efforts that have been led by the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service to put in legislation dealing with how boards are selected in the public bodies. We in the education sector, we are looking at that as well to see how best we can use that, probably modified in our setting. We have 1,000 boards, or more than 1,000 boards across Jamaica, to which we appoint persons. Over the years, historically, we have, we do have the National Council on Education that's responsible for the administration of boards in terms of getting the information, ensuring boards are constituted in a timely manner, providing information to boards, training information so that they understand their responsibility as a board. Traditionally, our members of parliament have been involved in recommending members to the board. That has happened over decades. We understand that we are in 2022 now, and there have been changes in terms of public bodies boards, and we do understand that school boards, as school boards, we need to look at the process as well as to how we engage persons to be on our school boards. We have to move as well in the direction of creating a database. We have to make people aware of the process in which they can indicate that they want to serve so that we have a larger base from which to pick. We also have to look at the issue of term limits in terms of how many terms consecutively you can serve on boards. We have to do all of those things. We have to modernize the framework under which we put together our boards. There will have to be legislative changes as well. And as we go forward, these are things that we will do. That's it.
Mr. Hall gets 2 follow-ups immediately.
Minister, what we're looking at is when are you looking at making the changes so that we don't have politically connected persons being appointed to multiple boards in a single constituency?
So we are working on modernizing how we do boards. And I'll outline again some of the steps we've taken already since I have been there, right? One, we have ensured that our boards are more properly trained. Over the last 2 years, we've had more sessions for boards to bring them up to speed in terms of their responsibility, the regulations under which they operate. We have, if you look at the record, we have ensured that all our school boards are constituted on time with the requisite persons. To have members of parliament recommend boards. Let me just say, our school boards operate in a local context, right? In small communities and they're all volunteers. Not a lot of people want to come forward and serve on boards. It is tough to get people to serve on school boards. We're trying to elevate the stature of school boards. The budget at the ministry is well over $100 billion. Our school boards make important decisions about hiring and firing of teachers and so on. Not a lot of people want to step forward on those boards. We have to utilize currently our members of parliament who know the people in the communities, who can encourage the people to go on boards. Sure, the incidents that surfaced had to do with one person being on multiple boards in a particular area. We'd love to see different people step forward and be on our school boards. But again, we understand the imperative for the modernization of how we select and put persons on boards, and we are committed to moving in that direction.
Minister, thank you for that comprehensive response. Mr. Hall, I think you had two follow-ups, so that's good. We'll satisfy you for now. And just to make sure that my statement is clarified, you all are not our favorites. You are generally the regular senior journalists who cover post-cabinet media briefings. And so let me now go to the Gleaner, and then of course TVJ has some questions as well.
Thanks, Naomi. Morning. Minister, on the Minister Morgan,
Her favorite.
of MP Hutchinson, will the Prime Minister be sanctioning him as recommended by the Integrity Commission?
Well, the report just came out, so there's a lot more to review on the report. But we also must remember that when the matters came up very early, when the statements were made in relation to questions about Minister Hutchinson, he was sanctioned. And I think that's something that the public doesn't remember. Mr. Hutchinson moved from one place in the executive to another place, which was lower. So action was taken long ago.
This is a different matter.
Not really.
It's a second time around. Will you be
No, it's the
sanctioned a second
same.
time?
It's the same confluence of issues. And at the time, the government looked at what was happening, and the Prime Minister, in his imprimatur, made decisions as it relates to the status of the gentleman. Do remember that these investigations take years, right? And we cannot wait on an investigation to act. So we've acted previously on the matter, and your research may confirm that.
Yes. Does Jamaica support the US's resolution to send international forces into Haiti, and will Jamaica be sending troops?
Jamaica functions through a collective called CARICOM, and also functions under the international. Are you ready? Jamaica functions through a collective called CARICOM, which is the route through which we exercise international action in particular things. We also follow the precepts of the United Nations, and it is through those avenues that Jamaica acts in relation to international matters of this nature. We know that discussions are taking place. Prime Minister and the Minister of Foreign Affairs have had several discussions at the CARICOM level. We also know that the UN is supposed to consider the matter and make decisions. And I suspect that before I can make a definitive statement, the Minister of Foreign Affairs will have to pronounce on the matter. But there are several things happening at the same time that I think she's awaiting on the international level before she speaks on it.
Thank you, Minister. I know TVJ has a question. There was a colleague, a media colleague, who apparently was on his way here, and there was a mishap and asked that a question be asked concerning JAMPRO in terms of the start for the search of a new executive director. So if Minister Hill could take that, then I'll hand over to TVJ.
The question, just repeat it again for me.
The question was inter
Francis.
alia, that whether or not the search for a new executive director to replace the outgoing one has begun.
What I can tell you is that the board of directors, led by Mrs. Melanie Subrati, is fully cognizant and aware, and they're the ones responsible for taking the action to find a new CEO. And I know that process certainly has been discussed, and I'm sure they're on the way. It's not something I get involved in the details, but I know the board is in charge and they're ahead of doing it.
All right, thank you, Minister. Jamila, are you allowing Mr. Hall? All right, so Mr. Hall, and then of course the fairer sex will.
Minister, just because you're on the podium, in your presentation in Parliament recently, you had announced that an expert panel was being put in place to lead the export drive. You never named the members of the panel, and you never indicated when it would start working.
Well, I'm not sure it was in Parliament, but I've said it many times. The export expert team is led by Miss Marlene Porter of JAMPRO. There are two or three other people I know. The head of CLA is on it. The CTD of the ministry is on it. She has one other member from JAMPRO. and they've been doing very good work. One of my senior advisors works with them, so the team has been doing very good work. Their report is almost completed, that part of their work. But the work will continue because, as you can see, we have quite a mountain to climb when it comes to making sure we grow our exports. So the preliminary work has been done. They've met with a number of companies to hear what they're thinking, which is when many of the companies say to them and to me that they're very pleasantly surprised to see people from the ministry coming to talk to them about the issues that they have for exporting. So the work is going on well, and the report is almost done.
Thank you, Minister. And now TVJ.
Morning, everyone. I'm Jamila Maitland, and I have two questions, one for the Minister of Information and the other for the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Jamila.
Good. So in light of the Supreme Court's ruling about security guards being employees and not contractors, what is the government's, has Cabinet discussed the government's approach as it relates to granting new private security contracts? Has there been any meeting with the PSRA around what is the timeline given for security companies to be in good standing going forward as it relates to their relationship with their employees? That's one. And for the Ministry of Education, there has been a lot of
Can I answer that
delays.
before you
Go
ask
ahead.
the education one? Thank you. So just remember the background of this is that it is actually the National Housing Trust that went to court on this issue. So the whole expansion of the rights of security guards came through government action. The case is a very important one. It's actually historic, and the cabinet has contemplated it. The Minister of Labor and Social Security and the Ministry of Finance have been having dialogue about it. I know that the Minister of Labor and Social Security has engaged the process, and I am aware as well that he will be speaking on the matter soon. So I don't want to preempt him, but what I want to say to you, Jamila, is that it's something that is at the top of the consciousness of government, because it does do a fundamental shift in the lives and the ability of security companies and security guards to interact in the way that they used to. So I want to wait until Dr. Clark and Minister Samuda make their comments on it, because they have to. It's something that we've been discussing. You had a question for Minister Williams.
Two questions for the Education Minister. There has been a lot of, I don't want to say fuss from some high schools about textbooks. What is the timeline as it relates to ensuring that schools have access to textbooks or certain textbooks? What is the delay going on right there? And two, during the latest JTA annual conference down in Montego Bay, there was an announcement that the government will be the Ministry of Education rather, will be transitioning from making payments from bursaries to now another form. What has been the discussions since then? Thank you.
All right, I'll take your last question first, and then I'll ask Dr. Troop on the issue of textbooks, because I know she monitors that very carefully. So we have been undergoing at the ministry a significant effort to ensure that the administrative side of the ministry as it relates to HR and payroll processing is more efficient than it is currently. And so we have been implementing the government's My HR Plus system. It's a very huge system that's used across government by a lot of entities. We are one of the largest ones that are coming online. I understand there's another large ministry that is also coming online as well. As we do this, we have to look at all our schools across Jamaica, because we want to bring uniformity, we want to bring centralization to how our teachers are paid, to ensure that they get paid on time, and that the information about them, about their years of service, about any changes that happen in terms of their telephone numbers, their addresses, their benefits, their health benefits, and so on, that we have all that information aggregated in one database that will allow our teachers the flexibility to access that information whenever they want, wherever they are. Currently, they cannot do this. We'd love for them to be able to go online and look and ensure that the data we have for them is correct, that if they've moved from one school to the next, that information is there. That's what we're doing. And we have to look at all our schools. Currently, our teachers are paid differently. Some are paid by the school, some are paid by the central ministry. This might have come about long ago because there were issues with central ministry. But I'm here to say that this new platform will enable us to uniformly process payroll information for all our teachers across Jamaica and give them functionalities and access to their own personal information that they never had before, so that when they get to retirement age, you won't have these issues of files being lost or some information missing or anything like that. We are in the information age. We're in 2022. There should not be a situation where we have to be scurrying around to find a file for a teacher to find this information. We have technology at our fingertips. Let us use that technology.
Thank you, Minister. I believe Dr. Troop, in terms of the textbooks.
Oh, sorry. I'm an eager beaver.
Okay. Good morning, ministers. Good morning, colleagues from the media. So, Jamila, let me just give you a background of what we have been treating with. We introduced a new curriculum into the system in 2016. Since then, we have had to re-examine the available textbooks in the market to align with what we expect from the national standards curriculum. Not many materials were available, so we had to give our publishers time to write new materials, to develop new partnerships with international entities to make sure that we have the materials that are suitable. That's an extensive process that delayed what we could have provided to our secondary schools over the years. Last year, we expended $200 million to assist our schools. That also was limited by the fact that the appropriate materials were not available. Our publishers have done some tremendous work in the area. We have reviewed and we have found materials that are more in line, suitable. We select materials that are like 85% and up, aligned with the national standards curriculum based on the review process. This year, given the challenges over the years, the government approved our budget, and the ministry allocated $1 billion to treat with the gaps at the secondary level, which means we are expending $800 million more in this year. We are procuring more materials. The process with the pandemic, with the reopening of school, with our principals being bombarded by the challenges of running schools in a remote experience, not many of our principals responded, to our calls to make your orders. Sometimes, of course, we got the feedback that, we have been doing this for so long and you have never responded. So we weren't paying attention to that. But we indicated to our principals that we have committed this resource and we know the need is there and we're asking you to respond. Not many responded in time. That delayed the procurement process. And we have had the opportunity to even speak to this at the infrastructure committee of the cabinet, because we have to give an account for how we do things in the ministry as well. And we outlined the challenges. Not that we're blaming our principals at this time, but we understand the difficulties of the time. So yes, the responses were not timely. That delayed the decisions that we could make in time for us to go into contract with our suppliers. Added to that, the challenges of moving materials, the shipment and all of that into the country. Even recently, I think last week, Minister, one of our suppliers wrote to indicate some challenges again at the wharf. We met with our principals, indicating the timelines, and we updated them. Just last week, I convened a meeting personally with my principals, especially in light of what I saw in the media in respect to the questions asked to our principals about ebooks. And we saw some errors in their explanation, and I personally use the opportunity to convene a meeting to explain to our principals what we are doing, what we are providing, and how they can help us to monitor the download of the books. These books have been assigned, and alarmingly, principals have expressed concerns about materials not being available, and the books are not being used by the students that we have procured. 66,000 plus licenses have been distributed, or we are distributing based on responses from our schools. And those that have responded, we have oversight based on the facilities in place. And we have seen that books have not been accessed by our students. So we have called our principals, we have spoken to them about that, and we have given them oversight, access to the platform so that they too can be aware of what's happening. Out of that, we have decided to go into the schools. I've asked my technical team, we are going to look at those schools that are not activating, and we are going in. We are going to set up the sessions ourselves to put the students in the labs and to get them to download their textbooks and use their textbooks. We can see usage, we can see download. That's how we are moving in the Ministry of Education. So we can account for what we are investing in our children. We have also had some of our suppliers agreeing to provide tablets for schools that are moving apace with downloading. So those who within the next 2 months have 90% or more, we are going to reward them for that. So that's what we are doing in terms of the support. We do have some delays, and we have said that. And in my meeting last week with our principals, we have given them the updated timelines. Many of the books are already in the schools in terms of the orders that they submit to us, but we do have some delays, and some of them, and we have explained the challenges. But the ebooks are available, they are ready, and we're asking them to make the time to support the students to download. Remember, those students were not chosen randomly. For students who are assigned license for ebooks, they were submitted to us by our schools, and we gave criteria. The student must have a device. The student must not get an ebook and a hard copy, right? And so those are some of the things we have to work with. So we did not take a random decision as to who gets. We are working with our principals. So I'm using this opportunity to ask our principals, we must get value for money. It's not just about expending, it's about how the students are using and accessing. We have also made some resources available to our teachers for the math texts. We have provided that in ebook format, and we are not seeing those being downloaded as well. We have oversight, and just one principal asked in the meeting, what are we going to do? The truth is, we're not in the business of being punitive with our school leaders. We're on one team. You're a part of what we do. But we have facilities in our education regulation that treat with neglect of duty. But I'm asking my principals, whilst we have challenges on this side, let us work together for the benefit of our students. Let's use what we have. We have indicated to you that class sets are available. And whilst you may not be able to give every child a material now, we should strategize internally to make sure that there's a class set ready to move to a class that students have access to the material as you execute your lessons. So there are strategies that we have put out, and we are asking. For those persons who asked about photocopying, the ministry has a partnership and entered into a contract with Jam Copy. And that costs us $10 million annually and gives our students the opportunity and schools to photocopy. So in cases where materials may not be available, our schools can copy up to 10% of the textbook at any given time and make that available to our students to treat with any particular topic that you're focusing on. So there are opportunities there, and we're asking our school, just work with us until we can get it fully right. Just this morning before I came, I reviewed the call for textbook. So we're going to be sending out a call again, and to make sure that we have adequate materials for the year to come. We're starting early, and the directive from our minister is that we should complete for next year all distribution by August 31st. Please hold me to that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Troop. And a very important note that you made, that we're really moving to a data-driven kind of facility where we ensure that the data provided is the resources we're providing as well. Minister, your
Thank you
good
very
luck
much.
this morning, because we do have more questions.
We do?
Minister, this is a two-part but related. Does the government support a recent statement by MP Juliet Holness that anywhere that is unsafe to live, has rivers, and has garbage dumps, the supporters of the opposition live there? Also, will the government?
That's not what you said, though.
Yes, yes, that's what was said.
No, no, that's not what you said.
That's what was said. I was there.
I listened to the audio.
Also,
Those specific words that you use were not used.
yes, they were.
Your
Also,
article said comrades. You said opposition just a while ago.
opposition supporters.
Right, but your article said
Well,
comrades.
comrades.
So I said that's not what you said.
Well,
We need
comrades.
to be specific.
Also, will the government order an investigation into, well, to determine why $8 billion is unaccounted for under the Operation Pride program,
All right,
as confirmed by the HAJ?
so to your first question, and I have to be very careful because while I am PR chairman of the JLP, I'm also minister de facto, as you have classed me, PR chairman. So the statement was made on a political platform at a political rally. This is a government of Jamaica facility. Yes, but my Twitter page is not an official government page, it's my page. I'm just saying. No, but I will say this. Based on the evidence that we've seen and based on statement that we've heard, we've seen several occurrences. And Mrs. Holness was speaking in her capacity as a member of parliament in East Rural St. Andrew, where she has come across several communities where persons were encouraged in a previous period to occupy lands which were vulnerable. But I think the bigger point that Mrs. Holness was trying to make is the importance of leadership. And I think the reason that conversation is important, and I'll use one example. There were heavy rains in Bull Bay, and people were living almost in the river. The government said, we want to move you. We want to find somewhere for you to live. The leader of the opposition leader said that the people don't want relocation, they want assistance. We've seen in Bernard Lodge where we had evidence and we had to take it to the highest level, the National Security Council, because we had evidence that an organized criminal network was selling government lands to some unsuspecting, some naive persons. The leader of the opposition went there and said he's going to provide legal assistance. Against who? We saw it in Westmoreland, where the court ruled that the persons occupying the land were illegal occupiers. It came from even the murder of the original owner of the property, and the family took the case to court. The leader, the opposition leader, again went there, saying that the people had a right to the land, even though the court ruled. So leadership, we have two different types of leadership in Jamaica today. We have a leadership that seems to be going back to the Operation Pride style era of housing, where persons are encouraged to occupy land that does not belong to them, and then they get the cover of their political leaders. And then we have leadership that says we're a country of rules and laws. We have built and started more housing units than any other government in the history of Jamaica. NHD is doing 10,000 on average every year. NHDC, which is now the HAJ, is projecting 9,000. So the question about whether the government cares about poor people and housing is really irrelevant. The question now is, how do we, as a government, structure our housing policy where persons who are vulnerable can be regularized, persons who have been put in these positions can be regularized. Some of them cannot be regularized because they live in a riverbed. And if the government, let's say, gives some of the persons in Bedward Gardens who were encouraged to squat there in the riverbed, if the government says, we're going to give you a title, then the government has now assumed responsibility if something should happen to them. But what we've been doing through systematic titling, through the National Land Agency, and we've been doing through LAMP. Systematic titling is doing an average of 7,000. LAMP is doing about 5,000. Is we have been locating these communities, locating these persons. Not all of them are squatters. Some have land from family, and we've been trying to title them. We've been also trying to go through some of these communities and provide them with the water, the sewage, the light, right? And that is what we are doing at Clifton in Bernard Lodge. Clifton was a community of informal settlers, and we have said to them, we want to regularize you. And that's why we had that reserve section, Kimon, where the reserve section was in case we had to expand the road and somebody was living there, we could say, okay, well, we're going to move you from Clifton proper and put you in the reserve sections. And that is the irony of the situation, is that the section of land designated to assist the legitimate persons in Clifton was now being sold by unscrupulous persons, which would then have a negative impact on the quality of life of the people in Clifton. And the opposition leader went over there and encouraged it. That's the difference that we're talking about. And I think that's the bigger point. And if when I read through your article, you did highlight the bigger point. The headline may have been exciting, but the bigger point is it's about leadership and the difference in leadership that we have here in Jamaica today. You had another question.
Share.
Investigation of? Remember, there have been several investigations. The Gleaner has reported on some. There was one where one of the witnesses migrated, for want of a better phrase. There was another one where a particular, what they call genetically connected individual went to court and the case did not survive. The challenge with a lot of these cases is that many of the persons who participated in the action are connected to each other, and they never wanted to come forward to give evidence. There are constituted authorities, however, who have wide breadth, such as the Integrity Commission and others. And I cannot instruct them. It is in their remit and right to investigate what they want. But there are other constituted authorities, the police and others, who have freedom to investigate what they want to investigate. The government's interest at this point is to run a proper HAJ. Since we've been in government from 2016, we have reduced the debt from about $3.5 billion that the HAJ owed to NHT, and that is where the people's titles were used as security. We've reduced that debt to about 500 million. We're also completing a lot of the unfinished projects that the HAJ inherited, particularly in places like Luana. Prime Minister was also opened, I don't remember the exact name of it, Naomi, a development that was like 15 years late, where people had put their deposits through the NHDC many decades ago, and they could not get their houses. So one of the challenges that we have as a government, and the Prime Minister speaks about it all the time, so we want to run our mile, but we have to do a catch up. We have to fix a lot of the things that we came and saw, such as HAJ. So in order for HAJ to become properly viable and to fulfill its mandate, we have to remove that debt that it owes from NHT, and we've been very successful, that it owes to NHT, and we've been very successful in doing that. And I think those are some of the conversations that I think we need to have, not about just what the government is doing, but the hurdles that we have had to overcome to have the amazing housing portfolio that we have now. Thank you.
All right, Minister, there is one more, and I'll give the leeway because I know that there was a particular media colleague who had a mishap coming in. I believe there was a question also that was sent. Ms. Francis, you want to, and I don't think it's the same person, but this person would normally
Sure, Naomi,
have
go
covered.
ahead, please.
Right, so my colleague is asking for your comments on the effects of the industrial action being taken by immigration officers today.
That's news to me. When did that happen? Oh, well, I was at a function, so I wouldn't know. But I'm sure that the Ministry of Labour is active in it. Hard for me to comment, Kim, when I don't know the facts of the case, so I won't. All right, what's the next one?
Indeed.
That's it?
That's it, Minister. And of course, there is, of course, as you alluded to, a mechanism which will be chipped in with the Ministry of Labor and IDT if necessary
Yes.
as well. So,
Right.
Minister,
Thank you very much. Thanks to Minister Williams, Minister Hill. I think we should have you here more often. Thanks to the team from the Ministry of Education. Thanks to members of the media and also members of the support staff, GIS, OPM, and everyone who assisted us. Again, thanks to the journalists who took the time to come here. There we go. Another successful post-cabinet press briefing. I ask everyone to be safe and to be careful. Thank you.